Have you ever heard of the Doomsday Clock? While it sounds like something out of a science fiction or horror movie, this clock exists, at least symbolically. It's one of the most well-known ways to alert the world about the dangers humanity faces. Despite being one of the most recognized symbols, few people truly understand it. But what exactly is this clock? Who adjusts it? What does it really mean when its hands move forward or backward? Is it a good indicator of our end? Let's analyze this in detail. The Doomsday Clock is very real. It's a symbolic clock created to represent how close humanity is to global catastrophe. Its hands don't measure actual time, but move depending on the risks we face as a species. The closer the hands are to midnight, the closer we are to disaster as humanity. Midnight in this case symbolizes the end of the world. And no, this isn't referring to something philosophical or trivial. This end of the world represents mass extinction or an irreversible crisis for civilization as we know it. This clock measures threats such as nuclear war, climate change, pandemics, and uncontrolled technological advances like militarized artificial intelligence. It's like a thermometer for global risks. It's used to remind us that if we don't change our actions, we could be dangerously approaching the point of no return. The Doomsday Clock was born in 1947, after the end of World War II, in a context where the world was dealing with the terrible consequences of the nuclear age. The invention was conceived by scientists from the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, a group founded by University of Chicago researchers, many of whom had worked on the Manhattan Project, which was responsible for developing the first atomic bombs. Imagine being in that era and seeing the devastating effects of the bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. How would you feel? There was likely a general sense of dread, but also alertness, because humanity had created a weapon capable of destroying the entire world. And yes, that's what scientists of the time thought. They were concerned not only about nuclear weapons, but also about the political context of the Cold War that at the time divided the world between the United States and the Soviet Union. At that time, the world lived in constant tension, much like today. To communicate the urgency of these problems to the public, these scientists designed the clock as a visual and simple way to show how close we were to disaster. The initial design of the clock was created by artist Martel Langsdorff, wife of one of the group's physicists, and since then, it has become a global warning symbol. The clock doesn't have a fixed schedule for adjustment. In fact, it's the Science and Security Board of the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists that meets periodically to evaluate the world situation and decide whether to move the clock's hands or not. This board consists of scientists, political scientists, climatologists, and other specialists from around the world. The movement of the Doomsday Clock's hands is neither random nor a decision taken lightly. The process for deciding the clock's movement is rigorous and transparent. Scientists review data from rigorous institutions, consult with external experts to obtain a broader perspective, debate internally to reach consensus, and publish a detailed report explaining the reasons behind the adjustment. This evidence-based approach is one of the reasons why the Doomsday Clock is so respected. Nuclear threats are one of the most important factors. Geopolitical conflicts, especially between countries with nuclear arsenals, are closely watched. Tensions like those between Ukraine and Russia or in the Middle East can escalate at any moment and generate a disaster of unimaginable proportions. Testing of new weapons like hypersonic missiles or the creation of increasingly advanced nuclear weapons also represent cause for alarm. When nuclear powers reduce their commitment to disarmament treaties, the clock moves forward, as happened during the years of greatest tension in the Cold War. However, when significant agreements are reached, as in 1991 with the end of the Cold War, the hands can move backward. Climate change is another fundamental pillar of analysis for the clock. Although initially the focus was on nuclear weapons, in recent years, global warming and its devastating effects have gained a leading role. Scientists examine changes in climate patterns, extreme phenomena such as forest fires, more intense hurricanes, and record heat waves. They also evaluate whether nations are meeting their climate commitments, such as those established in the Paris Agreement. When international action on climate change stalls, the clock moves toward midnight, warning about the dangers of ignoring this crisis. The climate crisis has the potential to destabilize not only the environment, but also the political, economic, and social systems that sustain our civilization. Global warming is already causing extreme weather phenomena that are becoming more frequent and intense. Observable effects include more destructive hurricanes, longer heat waves, massive forest fires, torrential rains, and devastating floods. Although these might seem like localized disasters at first glance, their accumulation has a global effect. For example, heat waves not only put millions of people at risk, but also affect agricultural production, reducing food availability and increasing prices, which can lead to famines and economic crises. The melting of glaciers and ice caps is raising sea levels, threatening densely populated coastal cities. According to scientific estimates, by the end of this century, many of these areas could be submerged, which would displace millions of people. Massive climate migration could trigger conflicts over resources such as water, habitable land, and food. These conflicts would exacerbate international tensions. Global warming is also affecting ecosystems and biodiversity in ways that could collapse the food chains we depend on. For example, coral reefs, essential for marine life, are dying due to rising temperatures and ocean acidification. The disappearance of these ecosystems directly affects human communities that depend on fishing as their main food source. Furthermore, the change in climate patterns is altering the habitats of pollinating insects, which are essential for agriculture. Without pollinators like bees, the production of fundamental crops, such as fruits, vegetables, and nuts, could collapse, endangering global food security. Many regions of the world already face water scarcity due to prolonged droughts and changes in rainfall patterns. This affects available drinking water, food production, and hydroelectric power generation. Water tensions are already emerging in regions such as North Africa and the Middle East. In an extreme scenario, these conflicts could escalate to involve entire nations. The consequences for human health are significant: deaths from extreme heat waves, expansion of diseases like malaria and dengue, respiratory and cardiovascular problems due to poor air quality, and psychological stress from environmental and economic crises. Global warming is not a linear phenomenon. It's full of tipping points or critical thresholds, such as the collapse of permafrost and the irreversible melting of Greenland. These can trigger irreversible changes in the global climate system. For example, permafrost melting releases large amounts of methane, a greenhouse gas much more potent than carbon dioxide, further accelerating global warming in a dangerous feedback cycle. Technological advances represent a crucial factor in adjusting the clock. Although technology has the potential to solve global problems, its misuse could generate new threats. Artificial intelligence, for example, is being developed for military applications, which could trigger conflicts without direct human intervention. Other important factors include biotechnology and genetic editing, cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, manipulation of information on social networks, global disinformation, and pandemics and biological threats. When the clock was created in 1947, it marked 7 minutes to midnight. Over the years, the clock has been adjusted 25 times. Some key moments include 1953 with 2 minutes to midnight after hydrogen bomb tests, 1991 with 17 minutes to midnight at the end of the Cold War, 2018 with 2 minutes to midnight due to nuclear tensions and climate crisis, and 2023 with 90 seconds to midnight, the closest point in history. The clock is updated once a year, usually in January, although the exact date may vary. The Doomsday clock, although not an exact measure, and having received some criticism for not being able to adequately quantify its methodology, remains an important warning tool about the dangers humanity faces. While it's not a definitive prediction, it reminds us of the importance of taking concrete actions to address the multiple global crises that threaten our existence. The question that remains is, what can we do as individuals and as a society to move the hands away from midnight? The answer lies in our daily actions, in our ability to demand significant changes from our leaders, and in our willingness to adapt our lifestyles toward more sustainable practices. I invite you to reflect on this topic and share your thoughts on how we can contribute to moving the clock's hands away from midnight. What concrete actions do you propose to face these global threats? Your participation in this conversation is fundamental to building a safer and more sustainable future for everyone. Did you find this information useful? Don't forget to share it with others to raise awareness about these important global challenges. The more people who are informed about these threats, the better prepared we'll be to face them together. Remember, knowledge seekers, the future is in our hands and every action counts.